And in this house, the most dire, horrible events took place.
You are not content with the stories. Slice the lives come. Be my victim.
Through watching scenes of violence, through watching scenes of transgression, through watching scenes of horror. There's an enormous amount of sort of abattoir of excess.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
We are into our second Lovecraft arc. I think we can be forgiven for going a little mad, don't you? Frankly, it would be rude not to at this point.
Hell yeah.
How are you, chat? How are you all? Good to see lots of regulars in the chat. I hope you enjoyed this one. This will be some mixed responses, I feel. Might have some mixed responses to this one.
Just one or two.
Yeah. Well, a lot to cover for this one. You know, I like to take a gamble. I like to try something new. This is the 95th episode of Double Feature Horror Show. And we're covering something that was a little bit of a gamble. I had never seen this movie. I just figured, let's give it a go. I like to test the limits. So we will be discussing that and the worldview of H P Lovecraft in a few seconds. No, Mima, we are not late. We are precisely streaming precisely when we mean to. And I will also endorse this. Absolutely, Victoria. Yes. Anytime you hear Be My Victim, you smash that like button. You slip something into the cup of tea. You've offered that like button. And then you take that subscribe and you just lock it up into the attic forever. What do you reckon, guys?
Definitely.
Solid advice.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
I could not tackle this film on my own. I needed my experts here. So I am joined by our resident Lovecraft expert, Murgoot. How you doing, sir?
Pretty good. Yourself? Hi, Chad.
Yeah, I'm chuffed to be doing this one. I had many feelings when I was watching, but I think the discussion is always going to be good. And
gotta love the 70s.
Exactly. And joining me is my regular co-host. He's sweet like chocolate. He brings me so much joy. It's that crime guy.
Wow. bringing out the old late 90s garage themes now.
Yeah. It came on in a running playlist, and I was like, oh, well, I'm not getting that out of my head for a week, so I'll introduce TCG with it.
So you'll just impose it on me then. Thank you very much for that.
you know what else they blasted out in the running playlist?
Oh, go on.
Giving it the old Call on Me.
Oh, wow. The old Eric Pryde's tune.
Yep.
Now,
I just thought I've got to finish this run quickly or it's going to be the old Fragma's Miracle, and I'm not going to get anything out of my head. Is this really confusing Zoomers?
Every man who was a teenager in the 2000s knows that music video. Evidently, Murgoot does as well.
Yeah, it's a miracle's what I need to get me through.
I have daughters. Let's just say that.
All produced to the tune of Fragma's Miracle and Scooter.
Interpret that as you will.
Well, we have a fair amount to cover, so we'll do the thing we have to do while we're on YouTube, because we want to spread the love, point you towards interesting stuff. So we'll do a little bit of shilling before we get going. Murgoot, anything of interest you would like to point people towards?
Just my Twitter, @Murgoot. I mean, most of it's just mocking everything under the sun. Occasionally science posting. I've been following the Turkish earthquake and the fact that Turkey is blaming an American warship with a harp rig. Yeah, right. For causing the earthquake. That came out as an official post, which is making me twitch. But
Gosh. You also tweeted this at me, which I absolutely love. This cracked me up. Where are we? This is my whole aesthetic. I've got to say, I'm so very down with this. I'll just leave that there for people to enjoy. All right. And TCG, how about yourself? Any shilling you'd like to do? I know you've been busy.
I have been busy. I've got a new video out that came out Tuesday, and a short to accompany that this evening. Now, I could sit here and blab on about the what on earth is that? What on earth?
That's a main man. Don't worry about it. I'll get my screen up. Don't worry.
Oh, love. Okay. I thought this was some sort of Mark Zuckerberg AI interpretation. Yeah, I mean, I could sit here and blab on about for ages about the story, but I've compressed it into a YouTube short, which I have linked in the private chat. Chloe, if you wanted to play that, because I give you permission to play my content, unlike the Spanish geezer who stole my video last week while we were live on air, which was rather interesting.
That was a saga, wasn't it?
I know. Still hasn't taken it down to my knowledge, but you know, I'll let it slide because I'm a forgiving person.
I don't know how I play this. I could just play the tab if you want.
Go for it. I don't know how it'll pop up on the screen, but
let's give it. It's 60 seconds, guys, and let's give that a go. All right, 60 seconds. Let's see how this works. Also, chat, you're going to forgive me booming, aren't you? I know you'll forgive me booming.
You're not booming. Don't worry.
Right.
There's no such thing as boomerisms. It's a myth. Lewis would end the lives of prominent Horseshoe Lake resident Sally Snowden McKay and her nephew Joseph Lee Baker in a home robbery gone wrong. He would be tried as an adult and would be sentenced to 28.5 years in prison. One of Sally's daughters, Martha McKay, a practicing Buddhist, would move back to Horseshoe Lake and purchase Snowden House, renovating it to use as a bed and breakfast and wedding venue. During this process, she also reached out to Travis Lewis, forgiving him for his crimes and supporting him at his 2018 parole hearing, where he'd be released. She'd give him a job, and despite warnings from family members and even Travis's own mother, Martha stuck by Travis until she would learn he had stolen $10,000 in cash. A couple of days after firing him, Martha would be killed by Travis in yet another robbery gone wrong. 23 years after ending the lives of her mother and cousin, Travis would flee into Horseshoe Lake, drowning in the process. Like, share, and subscribe for more true crime content. On the 10th of September 1996...
How did you manage to get that? Oh, hello.
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 Sorry, it kept playing. Oof. Yeah, I could feel the struggle to get that into the 60 seconds. You did very well.
Here's the thing: when I did some sort of like testing beforehand, I managed to get it all in 59 seconds, and then when I did the actual recording, it took me 1 minute and 5, and I'm like, oh my god, man, I've got to somehow cut out 5-6 seconds of dead air basically to make it fit. The joys of content creating. But yeah, guys, if you haven't already checked out the full video, go over to my channel, and it is the latest video on there. It's the story of Martha McKay. It's quite a tragic one, and one that I hope will spark some conversation.
Yep. And well, you've been keeping things relevant. I'm afraid if you've been watching my channel, folks, you know I disgraced myself utterly on Sunday, releasing a video about MILF Manor.
That was
horrifying. It suits.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe it is on brand. I mean, what else do I do except watch something absolutely horrific and then try and take a really elaborate read of it and put some highfalutin theory on top? You know, that's my whole deal, I think.
I did try telling my wife about that video and about that whole concept, and she just couldn't wrap her head around the concept of these women going into this manor, wanting to get themselves like a little toy boy, basically, only to find out that all of their sons were going in looking for a cougar. It took her a while to realise that, hang on a minute, these people are going in and essentially going to be porking each other's mums. I was like,
It's-
yeah, that's horrific, isn't it?
Innsmouth
So
effect.
it's perfectly fitting for your channel, Horror Show. Don't worry.
Oh, I love the suggestions as well. If it catches on, and we need this to catch on, we're going to have DILF Domicile, Step Bro Saloon. They can keep going for ages.
Wow, the
God.
comment section, man, it's the best thing of any video. Doesn't matter how hard we work on a video. You guys in the comment section, you are the ones who make it what it is. Sorry, I watched. I've been researching another case as well, which is very shocking. But I just want to confirm that we are 100% live. This is very much live, happening as we speak. This isn't a pre-recorded live stream. Because and I'll prove it right now. It's 8:11, and I'm looking at Holy Holy's comments saying, "TCG, that story was so sad. I want to believe in the goodness, but sometimes it backfires in the ugliest way." That is the modern day equivalent me of someone holding up a newspaper now with today's date on it.
And I just realised why you said that.
Points in the chat if you know which case I'm referring to.
Oh, it's a scheme so crazy it just might work. Except it didn't.
It was a novel idea, poorly executed. Pardon the pun.
Oh dear. Well, also speaking of chat, and hi guys, I thank you for turning up. I see chat is haunted by the idea of this is H P Lovecraft. I can't unsee it either. Should we have AI merge them to get?
No, that would be brilliant.
Shall we see? Oh, okay. If anyone wants to use an AI to merge Zuckerberg and Lovecraft even more, tweet me the results. I want to see them. But for now, as we don't want to incur the wrath of Super Nanny, we want to get into it. We should move on to the topics. I suppose all I will say is a massive hi to you, chat. I'm glad you're here. I hope you're looking forward to a lovely stream. If you're watching on the replay, hello, and do me a favor, smash that like, subscribe if you aren't subscribed already, and if you want to take it a little bit further and support the channel via Subscribestar or joining as a member on YouTube, you can do that right here. All the links you're going to need are in the description, and if you do that, you'll get access to exclusive content. There is going to be an increasing amount of that because we're covering anthologies a lot this year, and I really struggle to limit the choice, so we're probably just going to do loads of bonus episodes of additional anthologies because, I mean, we've got Tales from the Crypt coming up. How the heck am I meant to limit it to just 3 episodes? I've got no idea. That's going to be a struggle. Bonus episodes are the only way forward. So that is my last bit of. Oh no. I'm loving these combos, actually. These are excellent. Okay. Oh, no. All right. Okay. So we'll move on to our topic quickly. Just something I think we're in a place to do at this point, after covering so much Lovecraft, is to talk a little bit about the worldview of H P Lovecraft. And I thought I'd just throw it out there. TCG, to put you on the spot a little bit. What kind of vibes do you get about how Lovecraft looks at the world?
I
know that was awful, wasn't it?
I have
right on the spot.
I haven't done the politics of H.P. Lovecraft, but if I was to make sort of a snap judgment as to what his politics were, I would just look at the name of his cat.
Well, he was a Democrat, staunch.
He was.
He hated Republicans for being progressive and liberty-minded and populist. He really hated that. Something about him being xenophobic and feeling he was a man of the 18th or early 19th century rather than a man of the 20th century.
Yeah. And since you mentioned that, I have a quotation for us. Now, chat, I'm afraid I didn't get to go all the way through this because it's very densely written St. Joshi is the Lovecraft expert in my mind. But he is Lovecraft is easier to read than he is. Read from that what you will. But yes, St. Joshi is our guide here, and he has a book called H P Lovecraft, The Decline of the West. It has a chapter on Lovecraft and Oswald Spengler, which we'll be talking about next week. But this book is just an exploration of H P Lovecraft's views on metaphysics, philosophy, aesthetics, and politics. It's not massive, but it is very densely written. And Joshi is, well, if you remember one of the things we told you about Lovecraft, the guy was the most prolific letter writer around. If he had Twitter, he'd have never got anything else done. You know, the guy wrote probably 100,000 letters, and there are 5 volumes just of the remaining letters, the ones that are still existing. Think how much you have to write in those days to be able to fill up 5 volumes of letters. Crikey. So, in reference to what you said, Murgoot, about him being a sort of rejecter of modernism, we got a little quote from Joshi here. In his section on aesthetics, Lovecraft's view on aesthetics, where Lovecraft comes out fully behind the Romans, fully behind the Greeks, saying in a statement from his essay, The Case for Classicism, from 1919, the literary genius of Greece and Rome, developed under peculiarly favourable circumstances, may fairly be said to have completed the art and science of expression. Unhurried and profound, the classical author achieved a standard of simplicity, moderation, and elegance of taste, which all succeeding time has been powerless to excel or even to equal. Indeed, those modern periods have been most cultivated, in which the models of antiquity have been most faithfully followed. Oh, I love it. Which is a bit wordy of him, but what he's doing basically is something that probably a lot of us are going to be familiar with. Lovecraft was looking around at the world around him in 1919 and saying, oh, it's all gone to the dogs. It's terrible. Slippery slope, boys. We are NGMI. It's over. It's over, bros. And so what's he do? He's looking back all the way to antiquity, to the Greeks and the Romans, and he's rejecting largely the Victorian ethics that were already a little bit behind the times when he was doing this. Do you think that's fair to say?
Mm-hmm.
I'll take your word for it. I am the pleb in this group chat here.
Oh yeah, it's funny that he goes back to the classics. It's probably why he was so heavily influenced by the Romantics, Percy and Byron and Polidori, who tried to write in the classical vein, but brought a lot of flair to it. And then he was further influenced by Poe and Machen and Bierce, and especially Lord Dunsany, who went back to a neoclassical style, although rather fantastical.
Yeah, and that's where we're seeing so much of the, you might almost say, florid prose, but also the love of language that was already deliberately antiquated at the time. Like one of the letters I've got here on the page in front of me, he writes show as SHEW. So he was sort of deliberately being what's the word I'm looking for? Anachronistic, out of time. He's reaching back to what he admired. And one of the and this meshes with something kind of interesting that's another facet of him, which people will often tell you that Lovecraft is incredibly pessimistic and nihilistic. I think we've probably heard that description applied to him, haven't we?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Prepper, that's it. That's exactly how he writes it. And I think you can see why we get that just from his stories. I mean, these are not tales that tend to have happy endings, are they?
No.
Most of his stories end very badly for the protagonist, and most of them the world itself. The original Dunwich Horror was one of the few that had a happy ending, which the movie turned on its head. Just spoilers.
Yeah, the movie made many a change, but I think this is one of the cases where you would be best looking a little deeper, and we'll go into this. But yeah, it's fair to say, as my granddad once told me, if you want a happy ending, go to a masseur, not Lovecraft. Now, what? Honestly, folks, please. But just because he writes stories in which mankind is generally insignificant, microscopic, just basically so unimportant, I think that's got to be read in kind of a positive way. Lovecraft is taking the idea that we are so insignificant in this materialist universe as a source of horror. And I think he's doing that because he's carrying over a lot of how he felt about the impact of science and psychology on people at the time. He was skeptical of it. Let's see. So quoting from Joshi here, early in the essay, Lovecraft had claimed that the findings of modern science, especially physics and, interestingly, psychology, had proved an enemy to art and pleasure, for by revealing to us the whole sordid and prosaic basis of our thoughts, motives, and acts, it has stripped the world of glamour, wonder, and all those illusions of heroism, nobility, and sacrifice, which used to sound so impressive when romantically treated. And that sounds to me not like a man who is saying the universe is just a largely empty, purely material realm in which we don't matter at all. But if this and not explicitly rejecting science out of hand, but more, if we're going to take on science, if we're going to learn from it, if we're going to incorporate it into our worldview, we actually need to go to a greater effort to lean on art to almost balance out the impact of science. How do you feel about that? Is that a crazy reach out there?
Again, I'm the pleb of the group. I will just take your word for it and say, yeah, sure, go for it.
For the most part, you've got it down. He's very complex, especially he grows a lot in his later years. You have to remember, though, that he was an avid astronomer, amateur astronomer. The only reason he didn't go to school for it was because math eluded him, is the nicest way of putting it. He read into a lot of astronomy. He read into a lot of geology. He read into much of the earth sciences. He was very skeptical of Einstein's relativity, and he somewhat believed at the time in ethereal space rather than the vacuum of space. He he still argued it late in his life, but so did a lot of scientists at the time. He was very skeptical of things until it was proven. So,
yeah. He also ultimately does. I think he sees opportunity in it, or he does get inspired by it. As you say, he is an amateur. Oh gosh, which is it? Astronomer. Did I get it right?
Astronomy, yeah.
Thank you. Oh gosh, you're on a stream. The
astronomy.
complete astronomy. Yes, that's it. He was an amateur astronomer, and as we go later into his career, I think it's fair to say like his stories do take on a more science fiction element. So in the Mountains of Madness, which is a massive inspiration on The Thing, via other books, but it is almost like a grandfather to The Thing. And also one of the stories that we are going to read out on the next Cozy Literature stream is a more sci-fi story of his called Cool Air. If you want a little spoiler for that, it was adapted in the 1994 anthology Necronomicon with David Warner. It's an absolute treat. And kind of a weird counterpoint to all the MILF Manor talk that we were having earlier, but I'll say no more to avoid spoiling the story. Gosh. Yeah.
Read Arthur German.
Oh, gosh. So, how can I say? There was a comment earlier that I thought kind of nailed it. Where is it? Aaron Hook there. Oh, no. Here we go. Yes. Massive agreement here. And I think this, in a way, is why Lovecraft speaks to me a lot. It's I'm sure a lot of us here have our doubts about where things have gone in many ways, and a lot of us sort of aren't just looking back to yesteryear. We aren't just sort of looking back to a decade ago or 2 decades ago. A lot of us, and I mean, maybe I'm the only weird one doing it. A lot of us are going way back. I mean, like we're doing right now, we're doing Lovecraft streams. We're talking about stuff from the 20s. We're talking about stuff from the 1960s in our lovely little 1960 season. We're not feeling bound to look for beauty, look for inspiration, look for art in just what was more chronologically proximate to us. But we're looking sort of all over the place and happy to go way back for what works for us. And I think that really sort of, that aspect of Lovecraft's worldview really chimes with me and really rings a bell. No, David Warner is not in MILF Manor. He's not coming in the season finale as a twist where they're going to do the special Grandad Mansion. No, as far as I know, that's not happened. Is David Warner still going? Did he pass?
Let's have a quick look.
I'm trying to remember. I've got a feeling we maybe talked about him. Let's
David Warner, English actor. No, he died on the 24th July last year. So he's only recently departed.
Okay. Yeah. So I thought I would throw that out a little bit about his worldview. If you look around the mainstream media, they will tend to focus only on aspects of Lovecraft that they will call bigoted and xenophobic, and really try and crush a man from the late 19th century, crush him down into a box that can be tweeted out and understood in the most low resolution way. what I wanted to do is just highlight a little bit about him and try and get some of that complexity out there, some of the stuff that isn't going to be covered when people are discussing him, an aspect that I think is a bit more humanizing and maybe something relatable to us. And I'd say a lot more, but unfortunately, I really struggled to get through the S.T. Joshi book. It's brilliant. It's a great resource, but it's not easy reading, folks. We'll be returning to it next week when we discuss the Lovecraft and Spengler chapter, and hopefully able to go into it in a bit more detail. But on the subject of being able to relate to things, we were saying before the stream started about some interesting parallels between Lovecraft and the subject of the story, the Dunwich Horror, which I maybe is an interesting way to kick things off. I don't know.
Well, in the original story, Wilbur Whately was described as tall, goat-faced, ugly, smelly, and the way Lovecraft's mother treated him, telling her friends and associates that Howard was ugly and couldn't be shown around too much for fear of embarrassment, that kind of thing. Yeah, it does tie in a little bit.
Both Wilbur Whately, I think we could probably say central figure of the Dunwich Horror, although it's a bit more debatable in the original story. Both Wilbur Whately and Lovecraft, they're descending from a sort of aristocratic heritage family, I think we could say. The family that has gone from great heights to sudden poverty. We have an insane mother who is separated from the child. We have this lone son who's dependent on the grandfather to be raised and tutored, which is very much what happened to Lovecraft. Lovecraft, visiting his grandfather's residence, would go into the attic and raid the library.
They lived with his grandfather. It's the library of obscure works that he taught himself. They said that Lovecraft, he could write in Latin, but it wasn't that great. He was basically autodidactic when it came to his learning.
Yeah.
What's that?
Able to self-teach.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. Autodidactic is a great word. You can that wins you a pub quiz. That's a beauty.
I'll make a note of that one.
Yeah,
it's a fancy way of saying doing advanced learning on your own.
It's also where he discovered Edgar Allan Poe, I believe, which is fantastic. Dr. Prepper here, and also Joe have also picked up something very interesting. Yes. We will go back to this. We'll talk about it a bit more, but yes, that is indeed Dean Stockwell, star of Blue Velvet. We will talk about this a bit more, but I'm glad you noticed. So, where were we? Yes, we talked about being having the big, strong influence of the grandfather with the mother out of the picture. We've talked about the idea of being unsightly, about withdrawing from the world, rejecting the modern world, which Wilbur Whately does as well, and basically hoping for a return, hoping for a sort of something far, far older than the current setup. H P Lovecraft wanted it. Wilbur Whately wants it. It's this idea of someone who gets their knowledge and prestige, rejecting the modern world and finding older knowledge, forgotten knowledge, and living in that. I think there is a heck of a lot of H P Lovecraft in Wilbur Whately.
I was going to say, would you consider him to be like some sort of self-insert?
I don't know if I'd go with self-insert, but I think definitely one of those aspects where the author cannot help but reveal part of themselves. Not in a Louis C.K. way, but in a way that just the natural framing. The natural framing will slip through. So this idea, that I'm sorry, folks, you've heard me give this example so many times. One more time, but the way that Hollywood screenwriters really increasingly like to write protagonists who aren't big muscly hunks, but they are just big brains who actually have to win the girl away from the muscly, successful Chad, you know. And you wonder if there's a little bit of a projection happening there.
Definitely not how I'd write my protagonist.
Yeah.
Beefcake.
By the way, I'm just noticing some familiars. Dom, good to see you, man. Haven't seen you for a week or two. Good to see you back in the chat. I don't know how many people managed to do the horror homework for this week, because you guys, I had trouble finding this.
Oh, I must pay for it. I mean, I did pay for it. What am I talking about?
Yeah. I mean, I pay for my copy every week, but I definitely paid for it this week.
Too bad I didn't send you the link before you.
Alas, the sacrifices we make, you know. Chat, how did you find this? Did you manage to get your hands on it? Had you heard of this one before? The impression I get of it is that this is not one of the better known Lovecraft adaptations.
It is and it isn't. It's pretty infamous inside people who participate in all things H P Lovecraft, just because it's an adequate movie. But it is most definitely the psychedelic 70s. And that detracts from it. And it also doesn't follow the short story that well.
I say I'm not familiar with the short story, so this would be my only point of reference for this particular type of story. So knowing that it doesn't follow the original gives me hope.
Yeah, well, I'll show you the point at which I got a little sort of.
I love that comment from Box Prepper. I just noticed it now.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Actually, I saw, where is it? Yeah, Victoria said something. I'll get your comment up in a bit, but I got my sort of, how can I say, my spidey senses started tingling when I saw this. This is in the opening credits. But frankly, my spidey senses should have gone off earlier because, yeah, Victoria, I had the same thing. So the film starts with a birth scene, but it does take a while for you to realize it's a birth scene. The moans being put out by Lavinia Watley are not ones I would associate with birth. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, you think that's bad, Victoria. When I watched this today, but before my shift started at work, I thought, I'll quickly try and I'll quickly make a start on it now. And yeah, my Bluetooth headset wasn't connected to my phone.
Oh no!
Yep.
Oh no!
Busted. Fortunately, I'd started early enough where I'd got there early enough when there wasn't too many people around. But I thought, nah, I'll try again later.
Yep. Oh dear. Well, yeah, that start just had a slightly sexual overtone to it that I thought, ooh, that's not massively Lovecraftian.
No, it's exploitation.
I'm sure it won't come up again. And then I saw the opening credits, which had this. very, I think, just like standard devilish look. I mean, you could maybe say, I'm trying to think of how this isn't just a sort of Western devil style art, but this also threw me off because I thought Lovecraft, I feel, goes out of his way to not reference classic Western myths. Like, he really tries to do his own thing, you know?
Yeah.
So seeing like a devil really threw me off. I thought, hang on, what? Are we definitely getting a Lovecraft story here? Oof. So, before we go any further into it and ask how Lovecraftian this is, we should probably do the absolute classic pint of Guinness summary. Does anyone feel up to it? Are you raring to go and try the challenge, Murgoot?
I'd almost rather have that crime guy.
Oh, really? Oh, come on.
Stitching him up again.
Since you're the newbie to it, I'd like to see your fresh perspective on it.
Right, okay, so it starts off with some professor guy doing some sort of presentation or spell, like
Professor Armitage.
That's the one. Yeah, chatting away, and then good old Wilbur, or whatever his name is, pops, and he's like, "Oh, let me have a look at that book." The book being the Necronomicon. And
can I point out that I was massively triggered by the fact that they take out the priceless Necronomicon in just like in daylight and just like, "Oh, pop it back, will you?"
Yeah,
I was so upset. Sorry to interrupt.
And one of those are like, "Nah, you can't." And he's like, "Oh, go on." And she's like, "No, the library's about to close." And he's like, "Go on." And the other one's like, "I'll go on then," which I found really weird to begin with, but I kind of gathered why as the film progressed. He then befriends one of the girls, or convinces her, sort of worms his way into having her drive him home.
Sandra D's character.
Ugh, mate, I could only think of Grease whenever I heard it, when I saw that name. Yeah, so he's up getting a lift back home by her. Jesus, Horrorshow, really? Have you changed my avatar? Why have you changed my name?
Sorry, I think it's...
Oh my god.
It's a family show, proper. It's a family show.
She takes him back to his house. He sabotages a car. She doesn't know. He starts feeding her Rohypnol in tea, brainwashes her because he wants to have a baby with her to bring his brother back from the side, because apparently he was a twin or something like that. And while this is going on, you got the professor and the other girl, who quite clearly wants you to know that Sandra D's character is her girlfriend. Definitely her girlfriend. She just wants her girlfriend back. Yeah, and it just is very sort of about and very 70s. There's a lot of color that's seizure inducing. Yeah. Does he bring the old ones back onto the other side? Well, continue watching this stream and find out, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, that about does it, to be honest. It's a weird one. So, as you would expect, we'll do a little bit of production history. None of this will surprise you all that much. We are looking at an American International Pictures production. Why is that not surprising? Well, look at it. It's the right time and place. You know, this is 1970, so this is a bit towards the end. But when I saw this, I thought, this is a studio that is taking the genres tales, the Edgar Allan Poe's largely, and then also deciding, okay, we'll do a little bit of Lovecraft as well, and try while they're in the public domain and trying to make the most out of it. So, you know, they were the studio that was taking these stories and trying to make whole films out of them. But this is towards the end of the run. you know. So the name I expected to show up is Roger Corman. Corman is here. He is a guy who directed The Haunted Palace, which was the American International Pictures adaptation of Lovecraft's The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, dressed up as a Poe film, which is really weird. But just the confidence was not there that people would know who Lovecraft was. So they pretended it was an Edgar Allan Poe film. For this one, I guess the word has got around. They feel more confident. But Corman doesn't produce this. He hands it off to what appears to be a much junior production team. The director is a guy called Daniel Haller, who is just by the look of it, just a guy who was in with Roger Corman. So producing all of those Edgar Allan Poe films. So House of Usher, Pit and the Pendulum. He was involved with that, just sort of doing basic work, set design. He also did Die Monster Die, which I believe was reasonably closely inspired by...
No. The Monster Thee.
Oh, sorry. It's German. No story about Germans
Exactly.
could be evil. What a mashup of references, folks. Forgive me if that's confusing. Yes, I was right. So The Monster Thee is an adaptation loosely of The Colour Out of Space. So he'd done a Lovecraft adaptation for AIP before. And then it's kind of cheaper genre picks for AIP, basically. He moves on after that into a bit of television directing that you'd know about. So Night Gallery, the original Battlestar Galactica, Knight Rider. But don't laugh at Knight Rider. Honestly. Shocking.
Hey, I watched it as a kid religiously, and then I tried rewatching it about 10 years ago and laughed my ass off.
Exactly.
Excuse me.
So-
Family show.
But there was one thing that really stood out when we're talking about this junior production crew making this. One name stood out to me, and that is Curtis Hanson. Curtis Hanson, like
Bob.
oh dear. No, Curtis
Fun
Hanson,
fact.
the guy behind LA Confidential, super serious, Oscar-winning, late 90s LA crime drama. LA Confidential, deeply subversive, I will note. But he's writing this really early on in his career. I find it hilarious. Sometimes you just find someone who blossomed massively afterwards, and you're like, what are you doing on a horny 1970 Lovecraft production?
Fun for have seen Hanson live. Yeah.
You've seen Hanson live?
Yep.
Do you reckon Harry would know who Hanson were?
Oh, definitely not.
Oh,
I'm
I'm going to ask him. Anyway.
ECG, I'm ashamed of you.
Look, actually, do you know what, mate? Don't knock it till you try it. I watched them. It was a couple of years back, and they were sort of promoting their album String Theory, and it's actually a really good album. It's really good. It's like they're performing there, like some of their old songs, a few new, but they've got like an entire orchestra working alongside them. It's really good.
Well, fair play. I will not knock them, and good on them if they've carried on making interesting stuff. Good on them. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is this is firmly in the realm of genre picks not being made by Corman, who's producing it, but he was a guy who I think was more passionate, and I think this junior crew really just wanted to make something that would sell, and therefore their approach is a little bit less purist, I think we can say. And this is why I think it's interesting to look at this adaptation of the Dunwich Horror and ask how Lovecraftian it actually is, because we have quite a few deviances from the original story, don't we?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They got some of it, but Wilbur Whately isn't a slick, handsome man in the short story. He's quite ugly. He's huge. He smells. He's monstrous.
They call him goat-like a lot as well,
Yeah.
which is a bit weird, but okay. Whereas here they've made Wilbur, played by a young Dean Stockwell, who I actually really enjoyed. It's an odd film, it's an odd performance, but I found Dean Stockwell here really quite captivating and doing very well with what I think is some difficult material to sell.
Yeah. The fact that Sandra D had just broken her Universal contract where she was making all the teeny bopper movies. And she wanted to do an adult film to break away, and then she refused to do the last scene nude, even though it was rather risque.
Yep.
And one of the bloopers was you could tell there was a body double because Sandra D had long nails and her body double had short nails. It becomes obvious after a second watching. It's kind of
Who was looking at the nails?
Obsessive film groups.
Fair play. I mean, that is not uncommon, though, to be fair. Like, I think even now it does still happen quite a lot, doesn't it? An actress will not want to do full nude scenes, and who can blame them? So occasionally the film would just sneak a body double in without the actress's knowledge. The example that comes immediately to mind is The Wicker Man, where, forgive me if I get this wrong, middle of a stream, I could be off, but I think it's Britt Eklund didn't want to do full nude, and so they just shot some extra footage with the body double late at night.
Well, she knew about it with this one because even in her risque dress, they had separate sets where they did all of her close-ups on one set and all the other action at the sacrifice table, with her being better clothed, so they couldn't do the peeping Tom thing because, well, Sandra D nude is big news.
Yeah, so it's an odd thing that they add her in, and we were discussing it. It's a weird change because they've effectively reorientated the story around this new character of, I just want to call her Sandra D the whole time. Nancy. I know I'm going to call her Nancy Wagner. Interesting name. Yeah. I'm going to mess that up. I know I am. They basically make her the protagonist, and then the big trouble is the rest of she doesn't drive the plot at all. You see this kind of early on in what I think is a bit of a mistake in the adaptation. It's something that Crime Guy mentioned. So I'll pull up the screenshot for it because it happens really early. And it's something that I thought was a bit of a mistake in the storytelling. Where are we?
They didn't point out that Wilbur was hypnotizing her, even though it was in the script. They didn't make it evident.
No, I mean, I kind of gathered that, though, when I was sort of paying more attention to it. I say, but at the time when I sort of pointed out, like everyone seems to be very agreeable or easily convinced either way. I wasn't really paying too much attention to what was on the screen at the time, but when I actually sat back and actually watched it properly, I did notice that they were doing like the old close up on the eyes. So it was more of a visual sort of, yeah, look, he's hypnotizing them. So I can kind of let that slide. Although there was another bit as well where a bit is when they pull up to the petrol station, and the guy's like, "Oh, you know, I hope you're not here to get gas or anything. I'm closing up." And she's like, "Oh, can you? Oh, please, can you just fill her up?" And he's like, "No, I'm closing." She's like, "Oh, please," and he's like, "Oh, okay then." Dude, why
Wait,
is everyone so agreeable? Yeah,
this petrol station
yeah,
with the hell gas.
that's right. Yes.
I thought that was a weird, cheeky little touch in there, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, why did you? It's I don't know, probably a little joke the prop people had, but yeah, this was a change that I thought was a little bit weird because Lovecraft often leaves a fair amount to the imagination. Sometimes he is describing a lot of stuff, but still describing it in a way to kind of confuse you and make it very hard to visualize what you're seeing. In the story of the Dunwich Horror, as we said, Wilbur Whately's very different. They describe him in a kind of mutant form when he dies. And the description is just really hard to actually visualize. So even though you get loads of detail, it's not very helpful. Now, in this, part of a problem is, for me early on, is we see that just openly that Whately is drugging Nancy. We see that he is sabotaging her car, which maybe isn't a big surprise if, you know, she goes to his house, he's a kind of weird, creepy, intense stranger, and she starts feeling weird and then her car doesn't start. You know, maybe it's not a big surprise that, oh, actually he's drugging her, actually he's sabotaged it. But to just show it outright and for her to never really recognize that she's been drugged or sabotaged or trapped massively robs your protagonist of any agency.
And
that
I didn't even get the vibe that she was the protagonist in this film. If I'm completely honest, it didn't feel like that at all. I mean, she was completely under his spell, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think she's set up like a protagonist because, you know, initially she's the one taking the initiative to drive him, but then very quickly she stops driving the story at all. Also, Joe, family-friendly stream, Joe. Please, I wouldn't have filth like that on my channel. Come on. So it is a problem, and you're a bit torn between, is Wilbur the protagonist? Is he driving it? Is Dr. Armitage, because he starts driving it? We haven't actually said Dr. Armitage was played by Ed Begley, who is my favourite of the 12 Angry Men. For anyone keeping track, I believe he was Euro 10. I could be wrong.
And yes, Ed Begley is the father of Ed Begley Jr. of Seen Elsewhere fame, and among other things.
Dom, yes, we get a giant invisible homunculus. We get it in the most 70s way possible. We'll get to that. That's actually one of the bits I'm going to be quite nice about, possibly to everyone's great annoyance. But, yeah. Oh dear. Yeah, it was frustrating. She becomes like a prop, you know. Nancy stops driving the story once she gets there, and then you're a bit short of a protagonist now.
Well, Wilbur Whately is a villain protagonist. He drives the story. He's the one driving the action through most of it.
He is. And now that's... I'm a bit torn how to take it. I mean, maybe... Shall we take let's take a quick comparison in the direction of why I think they made some of these changes, and then maybe we should compare to the original story to sort of explore why we have this situation about who the protagonist is, if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, let's go.
Sounds good to me.
Cool. So I was trying to work out why this film is so ridiculously, how can I say, this film is very horny, basically. The sexual element is turned up massively in a way that I do not expect from Lovecraft.
It's Corman.
Yeah, to an extent, is it just Corman? I mean,
it's his studio. He's famous for going from serious adaptations on a light budget to exploitation to sexploitation to exploitation, then back to seriously fun light budget fare.
That could explain it. I mean, he managed to restrain himself when it came to the gosh, how can I say? Okay, I've got the screen cap I needed. Lovely. Hopefully Susan will be okay with that. He managed to restrain himself for all the Edgar Allan Poe bits. But then he steps away from, he wasn't directing this, he was producing it and guiding it. But I sort of had a different theory, which is I think they got a steer to copy Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, I felt like that as well.
Excellent.
It had Rosemary's Baby's vibes, definitely.
Now, chat, I've got to apologise if you haven't seen Rosemary's Baby. We're not going to go into big detail here. Anything I think we're going to say probably will not be a big surprise for you, but we will talk roughly about some elements of Rosemary's Baby very briefly. It's an amazing film, highly recommended. But that came out, I want to say, like a year or 2 years before this. I will take a quick check. But in my head, Rosemary's Baby was 1968. Nailed it, 1968. This is coming out in 1970. It's a incredibly successful story about a woman who is, sorry for the spoilers, guys. A woman who starts feeling she's being controlled, and she has a weird pregnancy. I'll keep it as vague as I can for that. And there is a scene where she's impregnated in a dreamlike sequence, which looks so much like this. I thought it was. There's no way it's an accident. Definitely.
Do you know what? I actually, for a moment, thought that I'd started watching the wrong film.
I wouldn't be surprised. Like it's a huge swerve. And we're in the original story, we aren't getting these kind of details at all. We don't get anything like that. I mean, there's a lot of blank canvas that you can fill in with whatever rituals you like, but this incredibly sort of voyeuristic, highly sexualized cult action is, I don't think in the original text at all, but it is extremely reminiscent of Rosemary's Baby, which was a massive success 2 years earlier when this was going into production. And I think that feeds a lot of these choices to make the film incredibly sexualized, to try and foreground a woman protagonist who was not in the story before that's kind of abandoned. And also in the ending, which is a big swerve away from the novel as well.
Yeah.
So I think that's how we explain a certain amount of the weirdness with it. It was just responding to something that had been extremely successful. The other aspects that are slightly unusual for Lovecraft is the strong Giallo influence that was coming in.
Yeah, I was going to say, was there like dubbed or dubbed dialogue going on? Because again, when I purchased my initial copy of this film, I inadvertently downloaded legally, of course, I swear it must have been like an Italian dub of the film. And yeah, I know, right? And then I obviously managed to get my hands on a English copy of this one, and I noticed it felt like quite a lot of the audio had been had sort of like been dubbed over post production.
Yeah, I didn't find details of that, but I was watching it, and yeah, it's dubbed over. I mean, it's not going to be for the same reason that you have the very obvious dubbing, the very obvious ADR that you get in Giallo films, which, if everyone's remembering, that's because Giallo films would often just be cast with people from a multitude of different locations who didn't speak the same language, and they just got the script in their own language and acted in their own language, and they fixed it in post with the ADR. You gotta kind of love that, to be honest. It's so mad. In this one, I think possibly it's just a lower budget production. They're doing a lot of location shoots. I'm trying to think why they would do it, but it is so obviously overdubbed.
It kind of threw me. It threw me off a little bit. I won't lie. I mean, a lot of things in this film sort of threw my concentration off. But yeah, that was just one. That was just one of the things.
Yeah, very true. We're not
with,
alone in this. Other people are picking it up.
Yeah, like with Dean Stockwell's performance. Now, I like him because, you know, I grew up watching Quantum Leap. And so, you know, it took me, under that fake moustache, it has to be fake. I was like, he looks familiar. And then I was to check the credits and I was like, yes, oh my God, it's him. But he was just so flat. Everything came across like this, very dull, very dull, very dull. And I wasn't feeling it. And then there was the professor as well. It just sounded weird. Yes, put the Necronomicon back and make sure we're here for dinner later on. Like, what? No one talks like that.
Yeah, I wonder if Ed Begley was not feeling it. I mean, sadly,
he died shortly after the end of this film.
I was surprised.
Yeah, so I don't know, just sort of health possibly not going well for him, and he was possibly not enthusiastic to be in the ADR chamber. Maybe it was a difficult recording, but
yeah, I mean, maybe, but yeah, it was a shame because if there was one thing they could have tidied up on this film, it was that. And yeah, it was for me, it was just a bit of a shame because it as I say, really threw me off.
Oh, TCG, you're offending chat.
Oh, no wonder you want to burn things down, Maverick. That explains it.
Let's see. Yeah, so I thought I'd highlight this aspect. Sorry to bring it back. This slightly Giallo look. Now, yes, 1970 is early for it. You're not really getting... If you remember when we first covered Giallo films, we're talking sort of mid-70s, maybe, sort of earlier stuff, but or slightly later if you're really getting into it. But stuff was being produced around 70s, just before that, you know, with the original Mario Bava films, which had this kind of lurid lighting, you know, they were already around. So it's not entirely impossible that the director had seen some of those and was inspired. I mean, certainly the sort of highly sexualized aspect of them, there's a bit of continuity in that as well. But there is another element of it that we really have to talk about for why this feels not entirely Lovecraftian. And it's that psychedelic feel the psychedelic scenes.
I mean, do you know what? I might again, because I'm not really too well versed on all of Lovecraft's work, much of it, if I'm honest. But those psychedelic scenes, to me, just reminded me of when we watched. Was it Color Out of Space or Color in Space? I can't remember the name of the film. So I didn't really feel like a disconnect there. Again, I think just for me, a lot of it was more of a production issue. It was more performance issues, writing issues. I think it was more just the technical side of the film for me that let it down. I imagine though, if I sort of studied and did a little bit more work on Lovecraft, I'd probably arrive to the same conclusions. But as someone who isn't really that well versed, that I wouldn't have known. And yes, Needle and Fur, it's just a bit of banter.
Fair enough. What about you, Murgoot? Did you have any thoughts about the sort of psychedelic vibe that they have going on here?
It doesn't suit Lovecraft, but it suits the time that the film was made. I mean, if you look at some of the more popular, especially the exploitation films and a lot of like the go-go films, flashing blue and red and purple and yellow gels everywhere. I've seen enough of them that I'm just used to it. It was pretty heavy-handed in this, though, which, yeah, it really doesn't suit Lovecraft. It's like they were running out of budget at the point that they did the twins' entrance. They did a pretty good job with everything except for the twins' point of view, where it's all flashing. But it's early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. I didn't really mind it. I'm used to it.
This might sound like a weird callback, but if anyone remembers classic 70s Doctor Who, anytime, you know what I'm going to say, anytime the Daleks would shoot someone with a laser, they'd apply basically a similar effect, where they just do the sort of inverse of the cells. It reminds me of that, basically. I'll try and find one of them up here because I have saved it. Yeah, when they're being attacked by the monster in the end, I just thought Daleks, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but got it. There we go. I would say this is actually a nightmare to think. I've got a screen cap here. What I probably should have got is just a little GIF of the colors flashing. But around this center of the screen, I don't know if you can see my mouse movement. I'm just highlighting where the chap with the gun is.
Yeah, we
and
can see
hopefully you can make it out. Yes. So that's a chap trying to shoot the creature. I just want to say, actually, I just saw something. Dom, I see you just got recommended The Void. We covered that last week. That's a beauty. You give that a watch. It's a great little film, very Lovecraftian, very Carpenter. You watch and enjoy that. I think you'll really like it. We were big fans. Yes, Lynn, exactly. Tom Baker era. Tom Baker, John Pertwee era Doctor Who. Made me think of that. We've kind of been ragging on this film a little bit, pointing out how it's... Dr. Prepper's said it here really well here. Really is very influenced by things that are not Lovecraft. You can just sort of see it's just a product of its time a lot. But I did want to say I really liked one aspect of it, which is when the what's her name? The one who's really insistent that Nancy's her girlfriend.
What's her name? I've got the character list here. Was it No, not Nurse Cora. Elizabeth?
Here she is.
Is it Elizabeth? Mate, oh my god. Yeah, are we is this the scene where she gets she dies?
Yeah.
Can we I- dude, like the door rips, she opens the old hentai tentacles comes out, right? And then she's on the floor writhing whilst also taking all of her clothes off.
Oh yeah.
I also love the symbology that they use, the Pacific Northwest Indian versus Lovecraftian occult symbology. I mean,
Yeah.
the bird, that's just kind of like, I saw the staff again and I'm like, wait a minute. That's the great bird from
I think
Northwest.
I've got the staff here somewhere. I think I've got an image of it. The granddad carries around a big staff. Is that you can sort of see it there?
Yeah.
Yeah, he carries that around the whole time. Also, tell you what, while we've got this up, I will point out something else I absolutely loved. This film is in no doubt that purple is Lovecraftian. The more purpler it is, the more Lovecraftian.
If only they applied that to the story.
I'm unironically in favor of this. It's unusual, but it instantly does make me think Lovecraft, and they were making sure to get that in. I don't know. It kind of goes.
Dr.
Yeah.
Prepper makes a good point. She invaded the Waitley home. She kind of deserved it, honestly. She found out, as they say.
Yeah, it is.
And do you know what? Yeah, your rights end where mine begin. So
yeah, in fairness, Castle Doctrine. Oh no. The NREAB, yes, it was exactly like that.
It was.
Okay, but I do genuinely like this. This was the best bit for me. Okay, now we will forgive the fact that she came in, assaulted a pensioner for no reason who'd done nothing wrong. That guy was so hard done by in this film.
I know, man. He was like the he was like the guy in the last film, The Void. Spent most of the film in his arse.
Yeah, he didn't have a chance, poor guy. There's she also comes back to the house, and then I love this. On the porch, there's a massive eagle owl who's just kind of there chilling, and it's like, okay, that's cool. And then it's gone in the next shot. When she needs to like fall back against the railing where the owl was, it had gone, because she needed to, slap a pensioner onto it. Oh dear. Anyway, so once she's aside from the gerontophobia, she goes back in, and I kind of like this because look, this is gorgeous. Look at this amazing set, this lovely design. This looks cool. She's going upstairs, and then we're getting classic shots. We're following her down a hallway. I know I'm basically saying, please feed me cliches, but this film was very weird, and I liked having some solid visuals to follow. The vulnerable woman in the creepy old dark house was back on solid ground, and I knew what the stakes were a little bit. And we'd had a bit of a build-up as well to there being something in the attic. So it was nice to have something that had a bit of urgency to it. Got to remember, like, a lot of this film has been Dean Stockwell drugging and seducing Nancy at a very leisurely pace, There wasn't much rush. So seeing Elizabeth actually take a risk, go into the creepy old house, putting herself in danger, going in, going down the hallway, going to something scary, seeing the scary door, and then opening it. This was good. This was oh yeah. Yes. This was good. And then when she finally opens the door, I really liked how they handled it. Now I've got to find the darn image. Okay, here we go.
I will say, like, as good as it was, I couldn't help but thinking but think to myself, like, how influential was this on Japanese culture?
Well, you get the briefest second of something with what looks like a
Mate, look,
bloody red mouth and then a lot of
she-
tentacles. Yeah.
She is literally taking her own clothes off now. I mean, if the implication is that the I don't know, I'm going to call him Squidward, is doing it, they could have done a better job. That's all I'm saying. Because it just looks to me like she's going, no, please don't do that. Whilst, you know, oh no, my top's fallen off. Oh no, my bra's under. Oh no, my trousers have fallen down.
I don't know. I like the surreal aspect where she opens the door and it's just instantly 0 to 100 real quick.
I get that. Get that.
Flashing lights. You can't see anything. You can't work out what you saw the thing for about half a second, and then it's something just completely incomprehensible. And
Which
the fact that you then realize, hang on, she's naked. All her clothes are gone. It's like a kind of. It felt more like a psychological attack. Like it broke her brain and she's totally vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, again, I kind of get what they were trying to infer from that, given the sort of the tone of the movie up until that point. But it was just weird.
Definitely weird. Definitely a gamble. If someone was to say like this completely didn't work for me, I could see it, but I kind of liked it. How about yourself, Murgoot? How did you feel about this bit?
Didn't really affect me one way or the other. It's typical low budget overacting is all I felt about it.
I'm not convinced anyone. I was trying. I was taking
just I would agree that this was probably like one of the best kill scenes of the movie, but to me it just felt naff. But again, you know, I appreciate that this film was made in 1970, and I appreciate that, you know, there were probably limitations in terms of what they could show, especially at that time. But yeah, it felt naff.
Yeah. I would possibly try and sell it as just a good way to embrace the fact that Lovecraft should be basically incomprehensible. But I 100% understand if someone wanted to see it presented any other way.
In to this scene's credit, I will say that I think it was pretty close to Lovecraftian as it was going to get, because, like you said, you see the monster for a split second. It is sort of all over the place, you know, lights flashing and all this stuff. And you know, I do appreciate it from that angle. It's just when I can see her physically removing her own clothes, just it kind of threw me. I'm just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that?
Fair play. It's an interesting thing I liked in the original story. Oh gosh, I don't know if we have. You know what? We went on that detour about Rosemary's Baby, and we never went back to talking about the differences with the original story. We should maybe do that quickly. As for why this adaptation is a bit difficult,
I'll be honest. I have seen Rosemary's Baby, but it's one of those films that I saw so long ago I would barely remember any of it. So again,
it's been about 20 years for me. So
yeah, don't worry about it. So let's see. I think, Murgoot, when you were telling me about this, and this is one of Lovecraft's longer stories. It's not Charles Dexter Ward long, but it's long. It was being published in multi-parts, so it's got a whole bunch of chapters. And when he does something like that, it doesn't always cohere super well. So if you also pick up, say, Herbert West Reanimator, that was also published as distinct chapters. And And it can feel
serialized as pulps were wont to do.
exactly. And there is some coherence, like in the start of the story. There's a bit that the grandfather proclaims something is going to happen on Sentinel Hill, and then that's one thing that happens in the final chapter, and like it's like, okay, that was good, that was set up and payoff, like that. But the story doesn't have this sort of coherence. It doesn't have a clear protagonist. It's giving you this and Dr. Prepper, yes, you're correct, it was Weird Tales. He'd got this out when he was no longer like struggling as much with his reputation. He was a bit more of a reliable author, but at the same time he wasn't the the cover story for that episode of Weird Tales, if I'm correct. So you start off in what's a bit of a like classic Lovecraft fashion, in that you're not really with a protagonist for the start. The first chapter is sort of describing the Whately family history, and then you go, and Murgoot, correct me if I stumble on this midstream if I get this wrong. The next episode you kind of get is Wilbur Whately, who's, a lot more of a cursed, weird goat creature who grows up incredibly fast, like at a sort of superhuman rate, and he's ending up sort of 8 foot tall by the end when he's in his teens. He's basically Baron Trump, and he tries to steal the Necronomicon, and then he's killed off, and he's a proper Lovecraftian weird beastie at that point.
Yes.
And then sorry, Murgoot, go ahead.
Yeah. The history of Wilbur Whately, and yeah, exactly. The description of that is, and you're right at the beginning, that it doesn't really come together in your head. The description, the anthropomorphic hands and face, however hideous, but the alligator plate chest and the snake scale back and the furry thighs and the dinosaur-like feet, and then the tentacles out of the hips and the tail being a second mouth. If you draw it out by hand, it makes a lot more sense, but when you're reading it, it doesn't. And that's one of the strengths of Lovecraft. You read each part of the description and are horrified, but you can't quite put it together. And it gives you the eerie feeling.
Yeah, and the death of Wilbur Whately as he tries to get the Necronomicon is sort of the midpoint. I mean, we get something like that in the film, but in the film, Whately succeeds. It's in one of the really weird moments, he has this fight with the security guard with no music whatsoever.
Oh my god, yeah.
That actually added to it for me. That was one of the good points, that they didn't use the music you didn't end up with a Star Trek battle theme, which would have taken away from it.
I'd have gone.
Do you know what? Do you know what? I love that you said that, because again, when I was watching that scene, I was thinking like the choreography or lack thereof looks exactly like something straight out of Trek, the original series.
Yeah. Sorry, it took me forever to find it. Yeah, it's.
But
they just have a knockabout. Like the director says, look, you got 5 minutes. Just wreck this whole set. I loved it.
Yeah, just make sure you go through that table there. Everything else is fair game. Crack on, lads.
Yeah, but the fight music wouldn't have helped. It actually being loud in the library, but without the music, actually added to the film, made it seem more serious.
I could have probably gone with sort of a bit more effort into the shots, because there are a lot of flat, long shots where they just go around, and this wasn't Old Boy, this wasn't The Raid, where the long shot really works. because it's just such amazing choreography that you're hooked on everything. It was, I don't know, I kind of felt like I was outside a pub watching a punch up.
Yeah.
This was, yeah, we have 2 cameras and we don't have enough to do tracking, so we're just going to set them at 2 points and have them go at it.
Yeah. See, I'm not wrong. Holy Holy's with me.
I love it. I'll say I love what Needle of the worst kind of ASM was. Brilliant.
Yeah, that was an odd one. So as we're saying in the story, Wilbur dies at this point and he's a monstrosity. And then we've got about another 5 chapters, I believe, which roughly follow the film. They're mostly based around because Wilbur's dead. His twin brother
breaks out of the house.
Yeah, far less. He's not being fed. You get in classic Lovecraft detail. He never spells it out, but you get enough detail that basically Wilbur's brother is needing to drink blood from cows and from people to keep going, but he's otherwise locked away either in a specially converted shed or up in the attic. I like how Lovecraft lets you put the picture together yourself. It's not hugely subtle, but he doesn't directly spell it out for you.
Lovecraft talks about how they kept adding to the house in odd ways to keep the twin confined, and he breaks out and eats some cows, eats 2 families, and then starts killing off the cops that try and stop it.
Yeah. So you get a mob forming to try and take it down, and they're told this is not a physical being. You can't shoot it down. You need to use the arcane magics to stop it. And is it Professor Armitage or Dr. Armitage? What? Anyway, Professor Armitage, the chap played by Ed Begley in this. We have a chapter or 2 of him working to decipher an extremely elaborate code that Wilbur Whiteley writes his diaries in. It's very much like Charles Dexter Ward again, with the use of ciphers. And from that, he finds unnerving, disturbing, world-shattering secrets that basically give him a nervous breakdown.
Yeah,
I love it. It's such classic Lovecraft.
The Whately brothers are the sons of Yog Sottoth. Lovecraftian pronunciation. Yog Sottoth, the key in the gate. And also discovers the formula for the powder of Ibn Ghazi, which will make the invisible visible for a brief moment in time. And when he throws it at him, both in the makes it visible, and everybody's horrified and drops bricks. But that allows them to see it so that they can use the counter spell that he developed after reading Whately's notes.
Yeah, it's that thing of it's not the physical prowess, it's the arcane knowledge, it's the insight that does it for you. Remember that author projection stuff we talked about? Of course, Charles Dexter Ward ends in a very similar way, that it's the learning, the time focus to do the learning that lets you do it, and it's all in the magic words. Now, that's the story. The film doesn't exactly end that way, because remember, it doesn't kill off Wilbur Whiteley at this point. Wilbur and the introduced character of Nancy, they need something to do. So Wilbur spends a lot of the time doing an elaborate ritual to, I want to say summon Yog Sottoth, or use Yog Sottoth to open the gateway to return the old ones.
Yes.
And he's doing a bit of the old sexy magic here at the same time. Because, as we said, this film is intensely randy, frankly,
Yeah,
unrelenting.
propping the book on her pubic bone and rubbing up and down her legs and reading the book. And yeah, all classic 60s and 70s sexploitation.
Yes. Yeah, it's just.
Speaking of sexual exploitation, I've just popped a little message in the. Sorry,
I noticed. That's.
They normally don't start. They normally don't start till about 11 o'clock. To be fair, and it's normally on a Friday when I'm trying to record audio. So this is a bit annoying.
Oh dear.
Oh,
Well, it's not coming
anyway.
through on stream, but if it does,
I'll bang on the wall and tell them if you're being too loud.
they probably thought you were at it earlier playing this film. Oh dear. Gosh, there's actually a discussion in the chat there about whether Ghostbusters is Lovecraftian. You could actually have a chat here, about that.
Wow.
But let's. The point is that this film needed to ground it in the more reality. So they have Wilbur doing his sexy magic times here. You still get the crowd of villagers trying to stop the largely unseen creation of the twin brother, and as I showed you, it's a lot of POV tracking shots on something, just an actor looking in horror at the camera as it comes closer, and then they start messing with gels and inverting the footage so that it looks like I'll get up another one because I think I showed you the first version. So I showed you that. You get a lot of people being killed like that and just being knocked around and not really being super sure what's happening.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah, but we've grounded the thing here. So the battle isn't between Armitage and Wilbur's brother. It has to be between Armitage and Wilbur. And I think this is where the film comes undone a bit. I'll be interested to hear what you guys think.
Oh god, the spell and counter spell was just god awful. Although they did use the spelling as it is written in Lovecraft's story for it, but man, that was cheesy.
Right? Okay, sorry. The bit where he's actually doing the incantation before this bit. Please don't tell me that's how it was written in the book, because it just sounded like he was making it up as he was going along.
Lovecraft did. It's supposed to be alien. Aqua.
What are you doing?
It's a synthetic language that Lovecraft made up for his stories.
Yeah, just,
as a sort of fun thing, we're doing these cozy literature streams where we're reading Well, I'm not reading Lovecraft. Amy and Waifu do the reading. But we've had this literal problem of we can't do Dagon or Call of Cthulhu because there are there's at least like chunky paragraphs of the Cthulhu speech.
Right,
and
okay.
it's just like
it takes practice. You can do it.
I can't set those. They're lovely. I wouldn't inflict them. Imagine them on stream trying to pronounce the Cthulhu speak. It would be.
Oh no!
It would be brutal.
That would bring in more views. What you're talking about? You should be encouraging them to do that. Also, is it like Klingon? Are we?
It's worse than Klingon.
It's worse than
Klingon. Oh god!
The whole idea is that you should look at it and be wondering how the heck would I say that?
Right.
It's meant to look like worse than Welsh when it comes to pronunciation. Like you just have to think, how the heck does that?
Oh, Jesus!
How do you even make that sound?
Take Welsh and Irish Gaelic and try and write them out in English.
I mean, with no insult to the West English or the Irish, it's a very good example. It's just the way your brain approaches the language. If you see it in a romanization, it just completely messes you up because you can't say the language. You need to approach it thinking of those symbols in a completely different way, or you won't be able to pronounce it.
Right.
Jay, I wouldn't say it's getting trashed, but it's not had the warmest reception. We have some issues with this film, definitely. I'm glad people have picked up on the absolutely cheesy image of like putting the massive hardback book between Sandra Dee's legs there.
Yeah.
That was one of the most desperate bits, you know. Oh gosh.
She seems
Oh,
to enjoy
dear.
having it there.
No,
Seems
she
to be, I mean, so much of the film is her just on that plinth moaning.
Mm.
I thought Dean Stockwell, you know, he didn't have much to work with. One thing that I wanted to point out and ask what you guys thought was they didn't give him much of the Lovecraft dialogue to work with. So he was just having to say Yog Sottoth over and over again. Like they didn't give him a speech in the made up language. He just had to say that over and over.
Yeah, because he kept repeating himself, and then like when he was saying something different, he just it didn't sound like it was something that was written on a script to then spit out, you know.
I think it added unintentional humor to it.
Yeah.
And he was doing his best to sell it, which I really appreciate it. He wasn't hamming. He was doing his best to sell it. But, oh man, they didn't give him much to work with. And then you just... This battle here.
The hand gestures pushing and making the demon horns and flinching every time Armitage spoke and the opened wide eyes just staring at each other. And it's not hammy, but it's goofy all the same.
It is. It's a tough sell. It's a tough sell. I mean, I am being unfair here. I could have chosen the sort of classic reverse shot where you have intense focus on their faces. But I don't think they were even selling it that intensely. Ed Begley looked, I think, a bit confused. Like, he's just got this thing to say. He comes in saying something like, Yai nai Sottoth, and he just looked a bit confused. And then Stockwell looks annoyed. You know, like he was just about to clock off at Mackie D's, and then Begley's come in and asked for the McFish, and he's like, do you know how long that takes? I've just put that stuff away. He looked properly just miffed.
Well, I'll challenge you there, though. I mean, if the film was anything like if the end of the film was anything like the start, all he needed to do was ask again, and he would have been all right with doing it.
Yeah. Just have the insistence, yeah. I mean, bless, they're trying to sell it, but it's awkward, and I think the director didn't massively help. It makes me think of, do you remember the South Park psychic battle?
Oh,
yeah. Bless. Like, I'm trying not to have a go. I think the actors here, Ed Begley, we know is a solid actor. Again, he was the most based guy in 12 Angry Men. He was... Watch my 12 Angry Men stream. It's fun. And Dean Stockwell is, I think, doing a solid job. It's just what he's got to work with here is not a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, he also, not to be harsh, there's not much she can do, but Sandra Dee doesn't really give him anything to work with because she's mostly just lying back with a book between her.
Snatch. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, just in that image there, she's back. You can see the book. All she does is look. He doesn't get anything to really react to, so it's a tough sell. And then his magic is broken, and you just get a bit of a cheesy effect where he's hit by lightning, falls off a cliff, and explodes.
It's ridiculous.
It's a tough sell.
But like that, I will say that bit was quite fun. That bit was quite fun.
Yog Sottoth appearing in the cloud and looks like the COVID virus, but
it did. I like they didn't show it for too long. That was very sensible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just sort of forced on them, and then we get that special ending once Whately's disappeared, and we get that rare happy ending in Lovecraft, right? But then Murgoot, do you want to talk about the end?
In the original story, it was a happy ending. Armitage and his cohorts from Miskatonic walk away, and they're done. They've cleaned up the mess. In this one, Armitage brings Nancy down the stairs. It's over. It's over. And then there's the shot overlaid of the fetus where Yog Sottoth has impregnated Nancy. They kind of turned one of Lovecraft's few nice endings, if you can call it nice, into just the horror. And it wasn't really well done.
No, it's an odd one, and an odd choice. Remembering they didn't have to do this; it was this was sort of brought about by changes that they decided to implement in the story. So
yeah. Do you know what? To be fair, I felt like it felt like to me they were just trying to open it up for a sequel.
Well, maybe it. I mean, it seems to. It was just the sort of popular sting at the time. Leave it a bit ominous. We've got an interesting question here.
I did get Omen vibes.
Yeah. Well, okay, so this would be this is 6 years pre-Omen. It's what's another good well, possibly our comparison is still Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
So if I were doing this analysis there, Needle and Fur, what I would say is it fits very well into one of the main pro-choice message strategies that we saw in horror, which is the idea of the demonic pregnancy, especially one that your character has no choice over. So when you're trying to make the pro-choice message in the horror film, you always make sure that the character in question had no agency in getting pregnant, and they will try and make the pregnancy monstrous or demonic to justify the need to sort of combat that. In terms of the pro-life strategies, which I said are usually sort of based around sacrifice, I don't think they'd really come into this one.
No, I'd agree.
No,
I don't think it uses any of the pro-life messaging. If that's a bit confusing to your folks, I have an hour-long video where I look at pro-life and pro-choice messaging in horror movies and the way that the different messages are conveyed. And you might be surprised at some of the films and some of the analysis. Give that a watch. That's a bit of a classic. But yeah, I'd say if this does anything, it's probably the pro-choice element. Although it's a little early for that messaging to come in. Yeah, I think that's all I have on that, really.
Yeah, I was going to say if I mean, not as well put as you, but I was going to say if you had to put it in one of the two camps, it would have been the pro-choice sort of side.
Mm.
Because if you've got an evil baby inside you, or if it's potentially going to be a little bit deformed, then yeetus the fetus is I think is what they
Yeah.
say, isn't it? In medical
Yeah,
terms.
there's nothing in there about like the two main strategies would be sort of trying to show the taking of the life as a sacrifice. That's one of the common strategies, and the other one would be emphasizing like children's ghosts to try
Right.
to focus on the idea that there is a distinct spirit, a distinct soul involved. So those would be the two strategies, and we don't see
Yeah.
either of them here.
No.
So there we go. Now, we're kind of at the end of the film, but just before we do full wrap-ups and start talking about our closing thoughts and scores, I did want to talk a little bit about other attempts to do this story.
Okay.
Now, if you want to explore it, obviously there are some really nice audiobook readings of the original story. That would always be my go-to.
Yeah.
Give that a listen. I think Murgoot, the one you linked me to that I listened to and really enjoyed, was one called Chilling Tales for the Dark. Was that it?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a really nice version of it.
I will try and put it out on my Twitter if people want to go to @Murgoot.
Yeah, there we go. There's a really good idea. There was a TV sci-fi channel version of this from 2009. And it being a film based on Lovecraft, you will not be surprised to hear that our boy Jeffrey Combs was in it.
Oh, what was he?
Yeah, not only
wicked.
Not only is Jeffrey Combs in it, you know, our stalwart guy. We always expect him in a Lovecraft adaptation, but also Dean Stockwell is back, except this time Stockwell is playing Professor Armitage.
Oh, is that one? Is it? Okay.
Now, I haven't seen that myself, but I'm kind of tempted because I will watch basically anything that Jeffrey Combs is in. So,
Yeah.
Oh, we have another recommendation for one of the Lovecraft audiobooks. Dom, I will check that out. Thank you. I like these recommendations. And the other one is, unfortunately, it hasn't happened. I'll go back to see the exact quotation because, hang on, I want to get this right because this was so unlucky. Now, remember, guys, 2018, we really, really loved the Color Outer Space adaptation. I'm just trying to find my citation. Got it. We really loved the adaptation with Nicolas Cage, of all people, of The Color Out of Space. And that was by Richard Stanley. That was amazing. Oh, apologies. It was 2020, not 2018. So that went down really well. And Richard Stanley said that he was really keen to make some more Lovecraft movies. And he was going to do a whole trilogy. And the next one he was going to do was the Dunwich Horror.
Any word that's going forward? I know he got away from his Me Too moment.
Yeah. I don't want to go too far into it, but there was a thing that he had a Me Too accusation which he strongly refuted, and if you're going to refute it, he didn't hold back. He sued for defamation. He was very serious about it. He absolutely refuted the accusations, and seems to, I believe, have won that court case.
Did win. He did win.
Yeah, which I've got to say is, you know, I mean, it's dark subject matter, but as I massively respected his work, I hope it doesn't sound so too cheesy to say I was relieved.
Do you know what? Bit of a hot take, but that's kind of like the preferred outcome, because while it's not nice to have anybody lie about you, like it's infinitely worse to have something actually horrible happen to you. If do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd rather that person be lied about, if you had to pick one of the two, than to find out that they're actually like someone who, you know, abuses people in a
Yeah.
1970 Dunwich Lovecraftian way, shall we say?
Yeah, definitely,
I'm trying-
definitely. So he did, I guess what we would say, we hoped he did. He took it seriously and he said, absolutely no, I'm not going to have people talk about me like that. And he fought it.
Yeah, especially getting through. Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, I'm going on good with that. Now, unfortunately, the company he was going to make these films with just ditched him because of the allegations. But there was a development recently, and I don't know if you guys saw this, because we had some news in August of 2022 that Stanley was still going to try and make it his version of the Dunwich Horror. And this is going to sound so darkly comic. He talked about it on a podcast with a guy who he wanted to take the role of Dr. Armitage. That guy was Alec Baldwin.
Oh God.
So
Wait, what?
he talked about making the Dunwich Horror on Alec Baldwin's podcast. Here's the thing with Alec Baldwin.
Just make
And
just
Baldwin
just
was
make sure there's no.
interested.
Oh my God! Just make sure there's no firearms on set, for crying out loud.
I'm sorry, Richard Stanley is just cursed. It's
Brutal.
I know. How terrible is that? How terrible is that?
Wow.
That is brutal.
Well, I would be very surprised if we see a version of it with Alec Baldwin, but I do really hope we see Richard Stanley's version of Dunwich Horror, because I think he is making, he made the best one. Is it the best one? I don't know. Color Out of Space was a really solid example, so really happy with it, and I hope Richard Stanley gets to make his version. Well, with all that said, I think to make sure we stay on the good side of Super Nanny, we should start giving our closing thoughts and scores. And Murgoot, would you like to go first? And chat, get us your scores. Let's see what you thought
Sorry,
of this.
before you do Crow Minion, I'll give it a shot. Alec Baldwin.
Disavow. Oh dear. All right, let's go on, Murgoot. If you want to give your scores, we've got an opening. Opening shot by Oliver there.
My rating is a flat 6. It has 70s kitsch value. It was important at the time to get Lovecraft's name actually out there on the movies. Dean Stockwell did as best he could. Sandra D is an icon, and I can appreciate that, but it was so flawed. I'm giving it a flat 6 with 3 cheese.
A flat 6 and 3 cheese. Yeah, fair play. How about yourself, TCG?
I actually think Murgoot scored it a bit high, if I'm completely honest with you. This film had too many issues for me to think, oh, it's so bad it's good. Vibes. It wasn't a great film. I struggled to keep I struggled to concentrate on it because it just didn't feel like it was going anywhere that quickly. And bearing in mind, this is a 90-minute film, and it felt a hell of a lot longer than that. The dialogue was very wooden. The acting, I should say, was very wooden. From some of the characters that you would expect, also from some of the actors, I should say, that you would expect to give stronger performances than they did. I found the post-production dubbing afterwards, there were syncing issues, I think, and it didn't line up with the environment. I appreciate it's a 70s film, so visually, in terms of graphics or special effects, it wouldn't be sort of up to higher standards, but it felt quite those areas in places. But I would sort of give it praise on sort of like the obscurity of the Lovecraftian monsters, the way that it sort of tried to hide them through the sort of like the seizure-inducing lights, was quite cool. But yeah, not enough to redeem it, I'm afraid. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 12 burgers. Plenty of cheese because it deserves it for the amount of exploitation, shall we say. But yeah, not a winner for me. But I would like to see the 2008-2009 version if it's got Jeffrey Combs and Dean Stockton's in it as well. I'll give him another chance.
Yeah. And that'll be interesting. I can see that. I want to watch that just for that angle as well. It's kind of cute sometimes when you see the original actor in a remake playing the older role, like Sleuth had this with was it Michael Caine? I could be wrong.
Yes,
Anyway.
Michael Caine and Sir Laurence Olivier.
There we go.
Great
All right.
movie.
For me, well, I can't disagree with chat too much. You guys are on the money. The dubbing is an issue. The pacing is an issue. The directing didn't help. A lot of stuff came off very flat, and I think we just had the problem that we were lumbered with a protagonist who, well, we didn't know who a protagonist was, so it seemed like the story wasn't getting driven very much. And Sandra Dee wasn't given a lot to do. Things like you should have had the reveal of how sinister Waitley was as a bit of a shock. You could have dragged that out a bit more, but it's just shown up front at the start, which kind of removes tension. So that was a shame. And I like some sequences. I like a lot of the set design. That was great, especially Elizabeth getting killed. I know I'm probably weirdly in favor of that, but I loved how that was done. It seemed that just read to me like a psychic assault, so I bump up the score for that.
You just liked watching her undress herself. Come on, don't lie.
I'm far too classy for that, but even given that, I've got to say, yeah, I'm with you. I hate to say, I checked the time at 55 minutes, which I'm not proud of myself. I try and build up my attention span, but gosh darn it. So for me, it would be a 4, but I am actually giving an extra burger because of one thing I forgot to talk about. And it's this absolute Chad doctor. I love this guy. Look at him. Oh, and we've got a late one from the NREAB. Thank you very much, the NREAB, who was extremely generous and donated a bunch of memberships, which was lovely. So you absolute star, the NREAB. Thank you so much. I know I thanked you on the Friday, but I'm thanking you again. 7 out of 12. So yeah, you're more positive. For me, I think it goes to about a 5. I really liked this doctor character. I really liked how he was smoking, and he's just exuding class. This image is actually image number 8. Chad is how I saved this one.
Gotta love the gray hair powder and the egg white eye wrinkles.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some interesting aging up moves that were done here. So yeah, it comes out as a 5 for me. I would not really recommend it, I'm afraid to say. But I will definitely check out another version because I think there's potential for it to be handled in a more interesting way. And of course, if we get that Richard Stanley version, that's a winner. Now, I am going to have to do the horror homework announcement, folks. This is going to be a lovely one for you. You've stuck around to the end, so you get your horror homework announcement before anyone else does. And you will need this advance warning. We're doing a bit of a double feature next week. We're going to be joined by Harry from Lotus Eaters. And I believe, Murgoot, you still around?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, I like the consistency. So we'll have Harry from Lotus Eaters joining us. And I thought we'd make it interesting. We're going to handle 2 Cthulhus. It's going to be a tale of 2 Cthulhus. So one of them is an adaptation of the original story, The Call of Cthulhu, and it's I suppose we could say, a fan film made by the H P Lovecraft Historical Society.
In
And the-
Mythoscope.
In
It's a
Mythoscope,
silent
yes.
film with music and cards.
And now, chat, we've done silent films before. We did The Lodger from 1929, so I know you can handle a silent film. And the other one is going to be a thoroughly modern one. We're going to look at a 2020 movie called Underwater. Actually, it might be 2022.
Ooh.
I'm going to check quickly. Don't mind me typing. I think it is 2022. It is. Okay. So one of them is going to be ideally a fairly close adaptation of Call of Cthulhu. Underwater, I think, will be more of a modern reinterpretation or reference. We're going to see. So I'm going to treat this as a tale of two Cthulhus. And that is the horror homework for next week. So shouldn't have too much trouble finding those. And that will round off our second H.P. Lovecraft arc, because I think I'm doing an audience request at the end of February, because there was interest in covering a film called The Menu. But I'll confirm that. Anyway, you've definitely got it for next week. That is Underwater from 2020 and the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society's Call of Cthulhu in Mythoscope. That should be fun. And to stay on the right side of Super Nanny, I will be signing off now. So I will thank you all for watching. Thank you if you've watched this on the replay. I hope you've enjoyed it. Chat, you've had me laughing and cracking up a lot tonight. I had to mute myself a lot. Oh god, have we had any HP Zuckcraft mashups yet? If you make one, tweet it at me. I'll show one next week. That is us for tonight. So thank you, chat. Massive thanks, Murgoot and TCG.
Pleasure as always. Thank you for having me on.
No, I'm really enjoying this. I'm glad everyone voted. Well, not everyone. There was an appreciation for Craven when I gave people the options, but gosh darn it, I'm happy they went for Lovecraft. So yeah, that is everything. You can find my guests' details in the description below. You can find my shocking, appalling video on the morals of MILF Manor.
Oh god.
Give it a watch. It's a very serious video by a very serious person. And I will leave it there. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, y'all. Cheers.
#ShillGang.